What's going on, everyone? It's Adam Ayala, your modern psychoanalytical relationship specialist, and we're keeping on the topic of politics and how politics can interfere with your romantic relationships and your family. So we're here on humanevents.com, and we're reading an article by C.J. Pearson. He's a teen activist and entrepreneur, and he wrote this article June 5th of 2019 called Liberal Intolerance is Wrecking My Family. Let's just take a quick look to see if they say anything more about him being a teen activist. Nope, no they didn't. It's always good to know a little bit more about the person if you can, not just reading an article and believing you know them, right? So here we go. We're going to start reading this and really talk about what he's talking about. I refuse to allow the box that society put my parents into hold me captive as well. And just as I will not give up my activism, I will also never give up on my grandparents. So let's start the article. Milkshakes and worse are being hurled at conservatives and right-wingers. When President Trump was in London, intolerance caused physical attacks by leftists on the elderly. The police stood watching. During the European parliamentary elections, a war veteran was similarly assaulted. Why? For daring to express his support for the Brexit Party. It is easy to reduce such incidents to statistics, Pew Research Center findings, and opinion poll numbers. We often have to see the grisly image ourselves to recognize the level of liberal intolerance engulfing the West. So I want to stop right here. There's already people I can hear thinking in my mind, attacking this kid, attacking this article because they don't like what they're hearing. Like, oh, there's no intolerance on the left. There's, the intolerance and the racists are on the right. If there's no ability to really listen to someone else speak to try to understand what they're saying and see them as a human and not argue with the projections of who you want them to be in your mind, I would recommend to stop listening to this video or this part of the podcast, because this type of thinking isn't for you. You're not there. It seems to be a mean thing to say, but it's just, I don't know how else to say it. If you can only attack and you can't hear something that's different from your ideas, then don't do it. But if you want to learn how to, let's read. I'll tell you where I disagree and agree with him, and try to help with that process of how do we listen to other people who have different opinions without attacking or abolishing the relationships we have with them, which is the core point of his article. This is what he's trying to get across. So let's keep going on if you're willing to try to learn something new. Trump supporters are brutalized in public. Right-leaning personalities targeted on social media. People are struggling to make ends meet because of liberal intolerance. The links will always be down below so you can watch the videos. I'm not going to play the videos. Ideological bigotry of this kind was evident to me before I came across it online. It started within my own home. I came from a house divided, not only by political ideology and affiliation, but by generation. Both my grandparents, who have raised me since birth, are proud, card-carrying Democrats. For the past 5 years, I have watched as my relationship with my grandparents deteriorated. Bonds which I believe to be lifelong are fading for no reason other than my politics. For 5 years, I have made a name for myself as a proponent of conservatism and a supporter of President Trump, perhaps more than anything as an anomaly, a young black male with a set of principles that count as a rarity within my community from which I hail. From the outside looking in, it may seem like life couldn't be better. I held court with President Trump, bear-hugged Vice President Pence, and received a number of accolades for my advocacy. But for everything gained, from opportunity to notoriety, it has not come without a hefty price. The single biggest casualty is my relationship with the two people who I love more than anything, my grandparents. Since my foray into conservative politics, the relationship has been fraught with conflict. I can vividly recount each time my grandfather tore into me for voicing an opinion with which he disagreed, labeling me ignorant or misguided. I can vividly remember each time he accused me of kissing the white man's ass, dismissing my activism as unimportant and meaningless, putting me down without any sense of feeling or remorse. I can vividly remember each time, due to his intolerance, I was reduced to tears. So now we're getting to the heart of the story. There's a lot of people who have intolerance for those who think anything differently than they do, right? And we're seeing this here with C.J. Pearson's grandfather. I want to make sure I'm getting his name correct. C.J. Pearson, yeah. So we're seeing this here with the beginning of the story of C.J. Pearson and his grandfather. The grandfather telling him he's a betrayer to the black race because he's kissing the white man's ass, right? Bringing race into it. Disregarding what he's even bringing up in these conversations with his grandparents. So dismissing. What are the things that you say to people when you're dismissed? If you're saying this to a kid, to another adult, to a coworker, to a friend, to a mate, what are you doing when you're dismissing someone? One, you're telling them they're meaningless, they have no value, they're ignorant. And two, you yourself are making yourself ignorant by not even attempting to understand or wanting to know. You're wanting them to be as ignorant as you are, which is really what's happening in the mind, in the relationship within the transference, as psychoanalysts would say. And this is what we call narcissism or narcissistic transference. Narcissistic transference is the grandfather sees C.J. Pearson, Mr. C.J. Pearson, and says, you have to be just like me, and if you're not, I will punish you. That's what that is. And it's a hard way to be. You can't relate to someone in a meaningful way if you're in a narcissistic transference with them, or they have that kind of transference with you. They'll never see you as a real person, and when you try to be a real person, as C.J. Pearson is, by having different thoughts, you will be demolished, and that's a way of manipulating you into being just like them. Because I bet you C.J. Pearson was just like his grandparents. They would give him anything he wants. The relationship would not be hard. That's a manipulation. It's not conscious, really, in any way, but this is how we see people function. So it wasn't the words that stung. Do what I do, and you grow accustomed to rhetoric. It was the fact that he was the source of the words, that he allowed politics to destroy the long-standing bond between us. Meanwhile, my grandmother looked on. Regardless how independent or how defiant adolescence may seem, nothing matters more to us during these formative years than the support of those we love. And this is totally true. Look, adolescent years, so we know he's a teen actor, right? People will say to me, he has like another 10 years of brain development for his frontal lobe, which, covers judgment. So he doesn't know. And you're just going to, in a smarter way, disregard what he says because his brain isn't fully functioning, or he's a kid, or label him as ignorant or misguided because of brain functioning. Look, saying that a lot of the times is a smarter way of being a jerk about things like this and not wanting to understand. At the same time, biological and neurological fact, and it's fine. That's tough. You got to weigh both. But in adolescent years, the relationship with your main and primary caretakers, so it's mother and father, whoever is in the mother or father role, which for him was grandma and grandpa, are the most important things, most important relationships at that time. It's very important that mother and father, whoever's in that role, allows the adolescent to grow apart from them, to get out of that like symbiotic state with them and become someone different. And if you don't, the adolescent will just pull away more harshly most of the time. Sometimes, like I see with C.J. Pearson, he's trying to connect. He's trying to stay connected while becoming his own person. And this is tough. This is awful that an adolescent has to go through this. It shouldn't be, but it is most of the time and too often. For years, politics and partisanship has robbed me of that support of his grandparents. It has robbed me of that love. Yeah, and that's like sick if you think about it in a real way. It's sick. If you have someone in your life that has different political views, you don't have to rob them of each other's humanity, right? And what for? What are you gaining out of doing that? Should it just make you feel better? Why does that make you feel better? These are questions you should ask. And it doesn't matter what side you're on. If you're a Democrat doing to a Republican, or Republican doing to a Democrat. Really ask why. This isn't a one side where this only happens to Republicans, from Democrats. This happens to both sides, right? And we can input Democrat and Republican for religions, races, all this. So if you don't like that a Democrat would do this to a Republican, or a Republican wouldn't do this to a Democrat, and disregard them because of their political views, then you shouldn't be okay with this. Just as you're not okay with, I'm going to assume you wouldn't be okay with people saying, "Oh, you should only marry within your own race or within your own religion," because that's bigotry, right? So if you're not a bigot when it comes to relationships, and you think it's okay for people to love each other who are different races, different religions, you should be okay with this too, or you're a hypocrite. Let's continue. You have to, if your logic and values stand firm in one place, it has to stand firm everywhere else, or you become a hypocrite. So let's continue. In spite of this, we continue on and have no plans to stop. This is wonderful. It's not falling prey to it. It is not the betrayal of one's values that will remedy the political divide that plagued the West. It is more tolerance of disagreement and debate. Do you guys get what Mr. C.J. Pearson is saying here? But let's just cut this in half. So, it is not the betrayal of one's values that will remedy the political divide that plagues the West. So let's put it in his relationship, and maybe you can put this within your relationships with your brothers, sisters, mom, dad, whoever, even who you're married to, who you're in a relationship with. Mr. C.J. Pearson is not asking his grandfather and his grandmother to change their views, right? He's not asking them to betray their values, or to betray one's values, their values. He's saying, hey, the way to remedy the divide in our relationship is for more tolerance of disagreement, and for the tolerance of debate, of speaking, of real debate, not disregarding or saying you're misguided, of understanding. What's debate? Debate is beyond the stuff in debate class. That's part of it. It's discussing, learning something new, and knowing that you're right, and willing to learn that you're wrong, right? You guys get that? So you have to know that you're right and will be willing to learn that you're wrong. It's the main thing. And people don't do that. The mass majority of people don't do that. Or the ones that we see, the loudest people don't do that, I'll say. I don't know. The majority of people don't do that. So let's read on. And remember, this is a teenager teaching all of us this. Hasn't had, if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, hasn't had the same amount of life experience with you, but is teaching you something that too many people don't practice. And they really should. So let's continue with the rest. I disagree with the politics of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but I wouldn't allow that to forbid us from sitting across the table from one another, or perhaps even getting along. This is what the left wants, and is enshrining a new generation of intolerant activists. Take Carlos Manza as an example. On May 21st, Manza demands his 111,000 followers milkshake them all, referring to right-wingers. He insists his followers humiliate conservatives at every turn, that we should dread public organizing. So conservatives should dread organizing publicly. Fast forward just 2 weeks, and Manza is whipping up another intolerance campaign against Steven Crowder for hurting his feelings on the internet. He wants life both ways. To be intolerant, but never be assailed himself. To be physically aggressive to those with whom he disagrees, but never to be the subject of criticism or ridicule himself. So he put up some tweets here. Carlos Monza, milkshake them all, humiliate them at every turn, make them dread public organizing. So we're going to we'll take the word for it that Carlos Monza is talking about conservatives, and the story has been pretty publicly widely known, and so he is. So let's take this away from Carlos Monza. Let's take away the person for the moment, and just think about the ideology and the logic behind this. So here he's talking about conservatives, right? And I see a lot of people who are okay with this, with humiliating conservatives, making them dread public organizing through physical attacks like milkshakes, right? And now there's some talks about milkshakes being laced with quick dry concrete, which is gives you chemical burns very quick. It gives you chemical burns. It can burn you, right? But let's take this all away. The politics away from this. And let's not even use the person. Who cares about Carlos Maza at this moment for this thought experiment? Say this was Jonah Blank, right? And Jonah Blank said, milkshake them all. Humiliate them at every turn. Make them dread public organizing. What if they're saying this about Jews? This would be anti-Semitic. What if they're saying this about gays? That's homophobic. Saying this about Puerto Ricans, that's racist. African Americans, that would be racist. So think about the logic, right? Don't think about your party line, your tribalism. Think about the logic when someone says something. Think about, and then after you think about the logic, think about the motivation. CJ Pearson told us about the motivation. He wants to deplatform conservatives, all that. Okay, fine. And that may muddle up our conversation right now. But, so go back to the logic. So, milkshake them all. This is assault or battery, mattering what state. And humiliate them at every turn and make them dread public organizing. You know, public organizing is one of the strongest methods of minority groups getting their voices heard. Why would we want anyone to dread public organizing? I mean, that's anti-American, right? So see where CJ Pearson is coming from? It doesn't mean that all liberals are doing this, and he didn't. And I mean, some of his language somewhere kind of states that's how he sees things, right? This is what the left wants, and it's enshrining a new generation of intolerant activists, right? So he does generalize this, and then gives us a specific example that's very popular and big and has a wide reach, because it has a wide reach on major platforms like YouTube, Google. This is a very meaningful reach, so we can't disregard that. But maybe he's making a point, and we could talk a lot of crap about the right and what the right is doing, but he's talking about the left. Someone sent me an article that's like this, but talking about the right, and I'll review it and talk about the logic. But we should not promote ideas like this to humiliate anyone or make anyone dread public organizing. What would have happened with women if they dreaded public organizing to the point where they didn't march? What would have happened to Martin Luther King? What would have happened to all the gay activists? They were attacked enough. You know, we don't close the doors behind ourselves once we've passed through the door. That's hateful towards other Americans, towards other humans. And I think this is what CJ's pointing out. I'm trying to point it out in overall. I don't care about the politics. I care about the logic. But he just pointed out towards the left and the right fight, since we're talking about politics. So think about that. Think about this. Think about the logic of that. And why do you support that if you do? And I think none of us support attacking each other. We shouldn't. So my grandparents grew up in a time in which blackness inherently meant liberalism or leftism, a time when the color of their skin dictated their politics. We no longer live in such a time. Yeah, I refuse to allow the box that society put them into hold me captive as well. So we're going back to the beginning. And just as I will not give up my activism, I will also never give up on my grandparents. And then CJ Pearson is a teen entrepreneur, conservative activist, and commentator. And I'll send the links down below if you want to see his other articles, and I'm sure he has Facebook and on Twitter and all that stuff, I would imagine. So what's the point of this article? It's easy to cover it under conservative and liberals, left, whatever, you know? But what's this article really trying to say? And he started the article and ended the article with what his point was. He's allowed to be a person himself, right? And in all relationships, we have to allow the other person to be an individual person. And we can only do that when we allow ourselves to be individuals ourselves and not caught up in tribalism. I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm a psychoanalyst, so screw psychology. Like, that doesn't work. That doesn't do anything, right? And this always brings me back to Martin Luther King. And I'm a big fan of Martin Luther King's work. And we can always bring this back to just what everyone knows about Martin Luther King's work, right? The little part in his I Have a Dream speech. That we shouldn't judge people on the color of their skin, but the content of their work. So we can expand that. Let's not judge people on their political views, just on their political views, and project onto them what the hate that you want or the love that you want or their sexuality. We shouldn't just judge people because they're gay or straight or anything like that. Their race, we don't judge people black, white, Hispanic, Asian, any race. And this is what he's trying to teach us. He's in line with this, and he's taking it forward and saying, hey, if you just judge me by the color of my skin or my political beliefs and values, if you just judge me on that and hate me, then nothing will ever happen. We'll always be divided, and everything good will be destroyed. And that's the truth. You have to allow people to think differently than you. Now, when one side or the other goes too far and say they're trying to push bills and things like that you don't agree with, you fight against that, right? You don't lay down ever, but you fight the politics. You don't fight and damage and attack the person. All right. So that was a little bit deep. That was a little bit, yeah. So links will be down below. Another YouTube video will be coming up. I have videos every day, just about. Maybe Sundays there won't be a video every couple of weeks. You can follow me here on iTunes to get the full video or the full video, the full podcast. Forgetting that word. And thank you to everyone who donates to me on Patreon. It really helps. Gives me a lot more time to sit and read and think about this and become a better creator for you guys. And keep sending me these articles. Thank you for my Patreon member who sent me this article. It gave me a lot of new things to think about. And I hope I gave you all new things to think about, new ideas to think about. And I challenged some really deeply rooted feelings and values within yourself. Because we got to grow. If we don't grow out in the world and politically, that means we're not growing personally. And I think that's the reflection we see out in the world. We have a lot of people who aren't thinking for themselves, doing for themselves, and just joining whatever group. I don't care what, left, right, middle. So they don't have to do any work. And that's not how you can have a relationship, and that's not how you change the world for the better. If we all acted like we did politically in our personal relationships, they would be trash. And maybe that's why we have so many trash relationships out in the world. Personal relationships. All right, so I'll catch you all next time. Thank you for listening.